Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Modern Firm, where we sit down with leaders in the finance, tax, and accounting world. Today, my guest is Tevia Hoalst. She's the founder of TeKoda Accounting, a longtime small business advocate, and someone who brings a sharp eye for numbers and a real love for supporting entrepreneurs. Welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you here.
Thanks, Noah. Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Amazing. So, Tevia, let's start with your story. You've worked across corporate and small business settings and eventually launched TeKoda. So, I'd love if you could take us through everything leading up to that and what inspired that move.
Sure. Yeah, I love to tell it in kind of a truncated way. So you can let me know if you want me to elaborate on anything. But my last job I ever had was in a corporate setting, like a $7 billion private firm. And I took a lot of good things out of that. But there was definitely the typical story of a lot of employees were kind of disenfranchised and they did not feel valued. And I was certainly one of those. And so I worked for a long time to figure out my next steps. I always knew that I have kind of a hard fit for corporate because I want to ask why. I want to ask, let's do it better. I want to break things and find a new way and push boundaries. And, fair enough in a corporate setting, especially when you're not in like an executive level, that's not the need. And it's not good or bad. It's just not a good fit. So I had to find something else. And through a couple series of trial and error of what was going to work, I ended up landing on to initially I didn't even know what we were going to offer. I just went to my husband and I was like, the number one thing that I will do is create a phenomenal culture where the staff that I hire wants to be here, desires to be here, is treated well. And my philosophy is then they treat the client that much better. So that was kind of the base. And then I went, well, what can I do kind of mediocrely at first and then hire the best around me and let them do their thing and I'll do my thing. And that's where we're at today. We have a team of 15. We're nationwide and we have a really good time at what we do and we provide something great that's needed.
Absolutely. Was there anything that maybe, caught you off guard when you were starting the firm or that you weren't expecting?
Caught me off guard. I mean, other than saying everything, because I had not owned a business before, I didn't really grow up with business owners. My parents had W-2 jobs. And so I would say what caught me off guard the most, which I love when new owners lean on owners that have been through it, is that there are so many things you need to put in place and have that you just don't know what you don't know. So my first few years, like I didn't even know to pay quarterly estimated taxes. And so then I ended up with a penalty because I didn't know to do these things. Or you might not know to get like, if you're an industry that has sales tax, you have to get a sales tax number for your state and you have to submit that. And so there's a lot of different things that you just might not come across if you're not asking the right questions or the right people. And so those trials was definitely a learning curve.
Oh, I can imagine. And like you said, hiring people who know more than you and who are experts in what they do and then having them, under you and doing their work is the way to go. So I'd love to touch on something that you speak about is how small business owners should be outsourcing bookkeeping and everything so that they could focus on growth, right? But a lot of people I feel have an issue with that or they have a problem. And why do you think that's so hard for people to do?
I think it's just a change in time.
Yeah.
There was a way of thinking that you needed to have all of your staff in-house and on site. And sometimes that's still a good scenario to have, depending on the business or the owner. But there is an alternative, and that alternative ultimately can bring you better people with better knowledge, better experience, and at a fraction of the cost. Because as every owner knows, there is something that in the finance community we call total labor burden, which is more than just the wage. So when you're considering outsourcing, you don't want to just look wage to the contract price of who you're hiring. You want to take total labor burden of taxes, benefits, what do they need to be set up in the office, all these things. Because when you pay contract, generally you're paying one flat fee that then they cover anything for their company of those things.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we say when you outsource, especially in our world for mainly bookkeeping, we can come in sometimes total labor burden to our cost, like 2/3 the cost even.
Yeah.
and really be a huge savings, but you're getting the very top employee. Because the other side of hiring in house is, do you even as the owner have the financial knowledge and bookkeeping knowledge to find a good employee for you? If you are not from that world and you don't have that knowledge, you really don't know if you're hiring someone who's making a mess or doing a great job. Whereas if you partner with experts, we know what we're looking for. We know how to hire, we know who has the right knowledge or who's going to make a mess. And
Yeah.
we bring a team with us that is really very top notch. And also, the last point I'd make with outsourcing is no position in any company should have a key holder where they're the only ones that knows how to do that job. It's very dangerous. They could leave at any point, whatever, all the things that happen with that.
Totally.
And when you outsource, you want to make sure you're getting a partner who you're not getting that one key holder in their company. So we set it up that every file has two, sometimes three people that know the file, so that if they are on vacation or out for the day, someone else can step in and knows that work. And so we're creating a support system that you don't have to worry about that key holder.
Exactly. It creates transparency and that you're not relying on one person, right?
Correct. Yeah. And a
Totally.
lot of duplication so that there's checks and balances. You never want one person, especially in your finances, controlling the entire movement of money because, you can get into issues there, whether intentional or not. You just want another set of eyes in that process.
Totally. And Tevya, let's say for someone who's starting a bookkeeping business, should they be outsourcing from the very beginning, or do you think there's a certain point that they should hit before they start to implement that?
If they're starting a bookkeeping business, should they outsource?
Yes.
Like overseas
Yeah.
outsourcing? Yeah. So it just depends. That works really well for some firms. Some people, all their employees are overseas, and the clientele that they're going for in small business, wants that cheaper price, but they're not looking for the engagement. And so that scenario can work. I think it bases from who is your customer and what is the service you want to provide. Because, like for us and our firm, we're all nationwide, but we're US based. So we don't outsource. And we choose not to do that. So we're not a competitor in that market because we're about really high service. We want our clients to feel like we are down the hall and we're very, easy to get a hold of. And, there's no time zone issues. There's also no communication barriers. We want to know our clients' goals. We engage with them. It's very kind of white glove, and we want to really push them forward and not just produce a product. So if you're going to start a bookkeeping firm, I would start with, are you going to be a high service firm with a client who wants a lot of engagement? Or are you serving the market that just wants the lower price and less engagement? Because that's two very different markets. So
Yeah.
outsourcing can work for one and not the other.
Absolutely. That kind of ties into my next question for you is one thing that you speak about is how you help owners, use their data and not just collect it. And you want
Yes.
your clients to actually understand, what they're even seeing. So what are some simple ways that business owners can start making smarter decisions, based on their numbers? And how do you help them
Sure.
understand that?
Yeah, I love this now. You did your homework. Thank you.
Of course. I had to.
Yeah. So it goes into exactly what I was saying before. We are huge advocates that the right customer for us wants our input and is not just looking to say, here's your reports, good luck. We don't service that client, still a valid need. But what we do is we step in and we say, you go focus on what you're best at, and we will actually come in and add value where we're serving. And some of the things they need to be looking at, we try to point out for them. We try to look for trends. We try to look for things that are out of whack that their attention needs to be on very quickly. But we also want the owners looking at, I start with them and I'll go through like very basic checks and balances you can do in your financials that seem rudimentary. But if you're not doing them or you don't know to do them, you don't know if you have a problem. And if your financials are out of whack, you can't use your data for anything useful, including your taxes. So where our perspective lies is we'll come in and I want the owners knowing at least, a gut check now and again Do the ending balances on the balance sheet for your cash accounts match the statements? If they do not, you have outstanding things. Sometimes there might be an explanation that makes sense, but if they're significantly off, that's usually a quick red flag. Undeposited funds, if you use invoicing in your software for finances, that should kind of ebb and flow, but be like a reasonable number. If it's just growing, or negative all the time, another quick red flag that you can say, like, I think there's an issue here. If you have negatives on your balance sheet or even your P&L in the wrong place for your assets and liabilities that aren't appropriate, that's a clue to you, another red flag that maybe your accounting partner does not know what they're doing, or they aren't keeping the work up. So couple quick things there on the balance sheet you can look at. In the P&L, similarly, owners seem to be much more engaged and knowledgeable about the P&L because it's your revenue and expenses. So you want to actually be putting eyes on that and asking questions, because the owners generally know, what was our revenue? What are some of the high level expense items? And those numbers should look reasonable to you. If they're a weird number or they're way off, these are just quick gut checks you can do to ask more questions and know whether your financials are actually being populated in a, appropriate manner.
Exactly. So it's essentially about not just dumping reports on them, but kind of making them understand them.
Absolutely. Yes.
Got it.
Yeah. We are looking to increase our clients' awareness and knowledge, because the last thing I'd say there is, if you're a business owner and the decisions you're making are very high stress for you, the reality is, if you have good financials and you are using them to make business decisions, there is actually, I believe, almost no business decision that should be super high stress. Because if you set the emotions aside and you have good data and you are simply saying, is this the time? Can we afford it? All those data questions, the answers are there. And it doesn't really need to be a stressful, should I, shouldn't I? It's yes or no, so
Yeah.
it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. And that's all about going to someone who knows and understands that. A lot of business owners, they're good at what they do in their business, but they're not experts in the financials. And a huge thing that I've been speaking to a lot of firm owners about is this topic of that small business owners, a lot of the time, they think that they could do it all themselves, right? And that leads a lot of the time to the business slowing down or numbers not being right, and it ultimately is a negative spiral. So absolutely agree with you there. If someone's getting started and is feeling overwhelmed hearing all this, what's one thing that you would tell them to maybe focus on in the beginning?
Yeah, I think when you're getting started, there is a lot going on. I definitely had times where there was a lot for me to handle when I started. I'm a big advocate of the business community, whether it's local, online, wherever. If you already have third-party companies that you use, lean somewhere on the business community, because other owners will help you. Other
Yeah.
owners will experience share with you what they've been through, what they did, what worked, what didn't. I have found that I live and breathe in my business community and learn from them, and it's helped me be better, faster, stronger. So don't go it alone. Ask questions and find a community that you feel comfortable with in entrepreneurship, that you can ask those questions.
It's all about acknowledging that you don't know everything and being a sponge, right, to all the information.
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah. And I mean, frankly, when you're paying for a service for someone, no matter what it is, they should be willing to answer some questions for you. So I would also say, hold them accountable to that. If you have partners that aren't willing to talk to you or answer questions, maybe it's time to do a little shopping.
Absolutely. So, Tevya, I'd love to talk more about TeKoda. Where do you envision it going, 3 to 5 years down the line? Are you guys looking to expand, kind of maintain what you have? What are your plans?
Yeah. So I feel I've spent a lot of time in the financial world and the accounting industry. And I feel that we have kind of a pretty unique offering stemming from our culture and how involved we want to be with our clientele and how engaging we are, that we will talk to them. It's very unusual in our industry. So I'm very motivated, not only on behalf of our staff and growing our staff so that they can engage in our community, but for our clients to also enjoy what we're we're providing. So I don't have any limits on where we're going. I'm very interested in continuing to grow. We have high growth as it is, but my main thing that I'm actually focusing on is I want to get into acquisitions of other books of business to add to our portfolio. So as an owner, I'm constantly learning and educating myself. And so the chapter I'm in right now is getting into that industry, the M&A land, and like, how does it work? How do I find deals? So that's where I'm putting a lot of energy. So over the next 3 to 5 years, I expect some significant growth because I will crack that and figure out that piece of growth, and we'll add that in.
Absolutely, that's a huge market as well.
Yeah,
Totally.
I'm pretty excited.
Oh yeah. So Tevia, let's talk big picture. I want to kind of zoom out a bit and look at the state of everything right now. What trends are you seeing, in this industry, specifically with the clients you're working with? Is there anything that you're seeing change, with tariffs or AI or new technology? Are you seeing some of those shifts starting to creep in or not quite yet?
Uh, yes and no. So I'd say you kind of pointed on both of them that really are prevalent in our time, no matter the industry. So AI, very heavy in our world. It's such a wonderful tool. I really operate on a I don't believe in scarcity. So I think when you're out there and you're giving something good and you're doing it genuinely, everything out there is just a tool to help you when you have an adaptable mind. We're very willing to say, how do we use this? How does it make us better? Not how is this going to replace us or beat us or close us down? There's more work to go around than we can take. And so we're very big about how do we use AI as a tool. We use it every day in our firm. It does not replace us, it improves us. And I think that's really important. And really every industry should take that mindset of how do we use this to propel us forward and make us better. On the tariff side, that's been quite interesting. Obviously, we're in the middle of it. And so we're trying to see how it's affecting our world right now and how that comes out. But I do believe, especially with a lot of government contracting freezing and going on hold, there is phenomenal access and growth available in the accounting industry because when those grants are on hold or go away, there are going to be jobs in those industries, nonprofit, all these places that have this money. Well, their budgets are going to shrink. And so, even if they've done it one way forever, they're going to have to get creative. And a solution like what we provide, that we can come in and potentially be 2/3 of what you were spending before, that's a significant savings on a budget. And so, there's a lot of opportunity there where, we're not happy that that's the way it's happening, but in response, we are happy to be a solution to help them get back on track and where they need to be. So, wouldn't have picked that route, but we're here to help in making it as good as it can be.
It is what it is. We can't really change that. But I'd like to touch on what you said before. This scarcity around all the new technology, right? A lot of people think it's going to replace accounting, all these buzzwords. And that's not the case. I've been speaking with a lot of firm owners, and what I think is going to happen is the firms that leverage AI and realize it's a tool are going to replace the ones that are scared of it and hesitant to it, right? The same thing with the internet. When the internet came out, there were so many people who were scared of it and didn't want to adopt it, and then they were forced to later on, right? So
Yes.
absolutely agree with you there. Is there any, tech tools or systems that you've been implementing or looking into, or kind of just ChatGPT and that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, and I'll answer that question, but I want to give an example to your viewers, your listeners, on exactly what you said. So when we think about AI, for those of you maybe who haven't adopted it yet, if you think back specific to the accounting world, there's still a lot of CPA firms that only will use QuickBooks Desktop, and they have never wanted to make the transition behind a list of explanations why, some good, some reasonable, some not. And what has ended up happening is they've had extra time where they've only been on desktop and they've refused to go to QuickBooks Online or another solution. And Intuit itself is taking desktop away. Now, we know why they're doing doing it because one of the reasons people didn't want to go to it is it is a monthly cost and it's a recurring revenue cycle for Intuit. So that's why they're leaning into it. But it is a good solution and it works well. We frankly don't have anything I believe is better. But my point is, those firms that were avoiding the change to new tech have only been forced into it later to do it anyway. So why not be an early adopter that figures out the new tech and how to leverage it for years to come versus the firm on their heels that is closing the door and saying, we're not going to get involved in this because it's coming one way or the other.
Exactly. And it's good to position yourself as that leader. So, 3, 5, 10 years down the line, you'll be the firm
Absolutely.
that has been the leader in that, right? And you're leading that. So,
Yes. And we're
totally.
like anybody else. To quickly answer your question,
Yeah.
we're definitely on all the AI platforms and softwares, checking them out, seeing how they work. We're very interested in the crypto world. We have a very tech savvy team and forward thinking team. So we do have some crypto clients, and a lot of firms won't touch that because the tax rules are still quite fuzzy in that area. And so then the accounting rules are kind of confusing as well. What's the correct way to account for everything? So we're adopting that, we're embracing it, and we're saying, hey, let's figure it out together. We'll be involved in that conversation. So we're definitely getting into those tools as well, which there's a lot of crossover there.
Oh, 100%. Even my dad, he was doubting crypto. 3, 5, 10 years ago, he would tell me that he doesn't see it going anywhere and it's just going to be a facade and it's just going to like kind of drizzle out. But crypto is growing and it's going nowhere. And so it's smart that you guys are kind of hopping on that and trying to position yourself there. Tevia, I'd love to speak about switching gears here. Outside of work, you've got really cool interests, adventure racing, animal care, everything like that. How do you balance that with, running a firm? And what is your advice to firm owners who are, working 24/7? And I know that in business, obviously, there are periods of time where you're going to have to just forget everything and just put your head down and work, right? But ultimately, what's the point of it if you're not looking ahead to enjoying it, right?
Yeah, this is probably one of my favorite questions to talk about because I think owners, and I get it, early days, early years, I worked way more than I do now. And that's kind of inevitable until you have a team behind you and you've had enough growth. That's kind of the rotation. Where you don't want to get stuck is that is your cycle forever. You do want to figure out sales and revenue and balancing everything to the point where you can get to some balance in your life. Because frankly, if you're only working in the business and working too much, you're never working on the business anyway, which my joy comes from the big picture. Where are we going? What are we doing? I want to work on the business. I have not worked in the business in years, really. And so my message always about this question is you have to find things outside of the business that continue to fuel you because you're not giving your best if you're not taking that time for yourself. So for me, my belief is I am not going to wait until I'm 60, 70 years old and like can't even move and walk to do fun things and to mix it in. So I'm a mom, I've got an elementary school age kid, I have to balance that. But my husband and I are also super active. So as you mentioned, we are huge adventure race fans. We moved a year and a half ago, so that's been a little bit on the back burner, but we're really excited to get back to it. There's a lot more where we moved, and that's just a super fun thing that we can step away from our world and do that and then come back so refreshed. We bought a farm. I've started a horse rescue. So yesterday, I'm out. We had a new baby foal on the farm. And these are just all things that are my interests that fuel me to be the best for my firm. So when I come back to it, I can come to this podcast. I'm well rested. I'm happy. I'm giving everything to my company instead of just being drugged down all the time because I'm never feeding myself from an emotional and mental standpoint. So that like I said, early days, it is what it is. You're going to have imbalance, but you've got to take the time and again, lean on the community that you find in entrepreneurship to figure it out because nobody needs to live in the rat race forever. We work too hard. We take too much risk as owners. You have to lean on that community, figure it out and get some balance. And then, I really do think that's actually when you have multiples because you're giving yourself in the best way.
That's awesome, actually. I wish more people would hear that. And when you ask a lot of firm owners or business owners why they started their business, right? They'll say, "Oh, because I don't want to work a 9 to 5 for the next 40 years." But a lot of the time they end up, still doing that, but just in their business, and they lose sight of why they started the business. So I think that's definitely something that more business owners need to hear. Um,
Yeah.
Tevia, so last question for you is you've got a huge array of experience, right? Corporate, I see you were in the restaurant industry for a bit, logistics, and now this. What are a few lessons that you would give to a starting entrepreneur that is struggling and has zero idea where they're going?
Ooh, that's a good one. Leaning on your experience, like you mentioned, I really believe in having varied experience. I think it brings more as an owner. We have hundreds of clients, so they're all very varied. And my varied experience allows me to have more connection with different things that they're doing versus if I had spent my whole life in one vertical only, well, my view would be much more narrow. So I believe, get out there, get yourself some experience, whatever it might be, and make sure that you are not pigeonholing yourself. Get in different rooms, be open minded to different things. And again, it's the theme, obviously, of today, but it's very important is find yourself a business community where other owners can really give you some advice that will make a difference in your company ongoing. If you're the type that thinks that only you can come up with the idea, you're going to struggle because frankly, there isn't a single one of us that is doing anything really that is a new thing. Someone has come before, someone has done it. They have done it either better or worse, and you can learn from them and take it in, adjust it to how it needs to work for you, and you're going to be better for it. So I think being open minded to creating that community is really going to be your kind of golden ticket, if you will.
Yeah, that's gold. Time back to what we said earlier. I think that's the number one thing is acknowledging that in the grand scheme of things, we know nothing. And so to kind of absorb from other people is ultimately
And
what's
I,
going to lead to success.
Yeah, I think I'd wrap that in be humble and be curious. And if you can go into entrepreneurship, which frankly, it takes a lot of belief in yourself. So there's a lot of ego in the in entrepreneur community. But if you can take a beat and say I'm early days, I know what I'm worth, I know what I'm capable of, but I'm early days. I need to be a little humble. I need to ask a lot of questions and I need to be willing to listen. Active listening is everything and not talking over who's come before you, and not everything's going to apply, but take what you get, discard the rest and go on.
Absolutely. And even me myself, for the viewers who are listening, that's the reason I started this podcast, right? All the guests are way more experienced than me, have built way bigger things than I have. And so I want to speak with them to learn from them, right? So
Exactly.
that's very good advice there. Before we wrap, Tevia, what's the best way for people to connect with you or learn more about TeKoda Accounting or just to reach out to see what you're doing?
Yeah, we have all the handles in all the places. So we make it real simple. We're TeKodaAccounting.com, TeKoda Accounting on, all the socials. So we've got the content out there and we're very available on our website and our phone numbers and everything are on the website. So come chat with us. We're happy to help.
Perfect. Well, we'll drop that in the show notes so people can reach out. Awesome. Thank you guys for watching and thank you, Tevia, for coming on. Very, very fruitful conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much. No, this has been fun.
Awesome. Talk soon.